In the end, I would like to share you some of the critical tips about inheritance in practice. In past, inheritance was a major technique for reusability and extensions, but over time and from a project to another, people noticed that inheritance just most of the time complicate things and make them much worse. We will hear out in the industry something called prefer composition over inheritance. We learned already about the composition and we will revisit that again. The advice is if you can have an object inside your object, this is much better than using an inheritance so that you can avoid all of its troubles. So the rule is avoid inheritance as much as possible, unless really inheritance seems really the way to go. In this case, probably it is better to prepare very strong justifications for your team members about using inheritance. And also in a similar way, if one of your team members is preferring inheritance, you have to make sure that this guy understands inheritance and its complications and why is it a must to use inheritance in this scenario. Some very critical advices. When you are using inheritance, it must be it is really is a relationship. Sorry, it is a, not has a relationship. You must guarantee that it is a relationship. And you must guarantee that your parent class is a superclass for all of the possible subclasses. One of the very common mistakes is your current superclass seems very good with the current subclasses, but in the future when we add more subclasses, we discover that this cannot be anymore a superclass. So be very careful about that. One of the challenges here is that predicting the future is really hard. The second issue, and the most important one, sometimes guys find that there is a class that has a lot of what we need. So they think that in terms of good reusability, let's inherit it and just ignore the function that we don't need. But this is a very bad advice. Inherit only from a class if it is a good class, if it fits with your need. Never inherit from it just to make good reusing. This is an ugly thing that some of the juniors do in reality. Don't do that. Don't just use a class because you would like to reuse it. Inherit from it because it is a completely proper inheritance relationship. The second thing is about multiple inheritance. Multiple inheritance is a hell. It causes a lot of problems and a lot of confusions. And with a single mistake, you might end up, for example, with uninitialized base classes or errors for missing parameters, as we learned. Prepare very strong justification for your team about using multiple inheritance. If you would like a better advice, try to make your inheritance hierarchy just looks like a simple tree. There is one issue here that I didn't dig in its details, and there is no need at the moment. When we learned about the multiple inheritance and the super functionality, probably it should trigger you that how can we pass the parameters in this way? Like if I have to keep calling my super class and every class has its own init method with all of its variable arguments, how are we going to handle that if I don't know what is the next class? How I'm going to handle this problem? There is what we call cooperative multiple inheritance. This is a nice article that is talking about these details, and in very short, you can pass something like a dynamic dictionary of all of the attributes, and your super function calls are trying to pass this keyword dictionary. In other words, instead of having super functions that init functions or functions that has a specific arguments, you actually keep passing this dynamic dictionary of arguments, and this way every one of them is just picking up whatever he needs from the arguments. This is how we can make it more flexible. As I said, we should avoid the multiple inheritance. Maybe some future reading about that would be cool, or these links, but again, avoid multiple inheritance as much as you could. That's all.